You are now in the Reality Capture Network.
Welcome to the Reality Capture Network. We are excited to have another awesome person with us today, Mr. Daniel Jenkins. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we love to start these by introducing you and hearing a bit about your background. Where'd you grow up, and kind of the journey that took you into the role you're in?
Sure. Yeah. So for the most of my life, most of my existence on this great planet, I grew up in Florida. I wasn't born in Florida, but we moved there when I was a young kid. Mostly Jacksonville, Florida, and then after college, I moved to Orlando. Literally after graduating college. I am a licensed architect in multiple states, and I have a Master of Architecture degree from the Savannah College of Art and Design. And then later in my career, I went back and did an independent study at Stanford University within their School of Engineering for virtual design and construction.
Okay, awesome.
Which to some might be better known as integrated project delivery. So, and then architecture is something I've always been interested in, how things are put together. As a kid, I was the kid that made the sandcastle but never really played with it.
Yep.
So I think my parents kind of knew I was going to either get into engineering or architecture. Architecture drew me just because it was all about putting things together. It was about working with other people, solving big problems, etc. Early in my career, for about the first 12 and a half years, I worked on large commercial projects, so healthcare, institutional projects, some government, a little bit of military, judicial work. And then about 12 and a half years into my career, I had the great fortune of landing a role at Walt Disney Imagineering as an Imagineer in Florida. And that's something I'd always wanted to be. Growing up in Florida, Disney World was my background, and had gone to Disney as a kid and all throughout my childhood. So it was something I really was very fortunate to land a role at. At Disney, I was a senior project design manager. So essentially, senior project design managers within Walt Disney Imagineering, they manage all the architects, engineers, and at Disney, the graphic designers and theme lighting designers on projects. Could be multiple projects, anything from small projects up to lands or even whole theme parks, depending on the size.
Awesome.
So when I was at Disney, I worked on all sorts of different types of projects, retail, attractions, all sorts of everything you can imagine. And then about a little over 3 years ago, I left Imagineering and went out on my own. I started my own consulting firm, mostly more on the design management side of things, but I also get into giving back all this subject matter expertise that I've learned over the years and management style that I learned at Disney. So now I work, and consult with multiple clients, large scale commercial clients. Some of them are themed entertainment clients. Some of them might just be commercial clients on large scale projects.
That's awesome. I'm sure the time at Disney was a lot of fun. I think a lot of people imagine getting to work somewhere that they love, and so many people love the story behind Disney and of course the theme parks, and so getting to be involved with those had to be quite the adventure.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So and then starting on your own and looking at design processes, you've also wrote a book.
I did, yeah. So I actually started it several years ago when I was working at Disney, but of course I had no free time at Disney. So I really kind of finished it fairly recently, and it's essentially a culmination of my 20 plus years working in the architecture and engineering industry and managing teams and managing processes, trying to refine those processes. Trying to refine the design and the process as the train's going down the track.
Yeah.
So it's a culmination of all that. It's an open, transparent documentation of what worked, what doesn't work. In some instances where we failed and we had to retool the process. It's all that, and it touches on all different points, kind of soup to nuts, from inception through project closeout on a kind of a quintessential large scale commercial project. And it's interesting because a lot of the design management practices, the book's tailored towards the any industry, but there are practices obviously that I learned at Disney and while working at Disney that can translate into other industries as well.
Yeah, I bet. That's awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include a link so people interested in checking that out can find it from you.
Thank you.
So like we've talked with you about, and thanks for joining us on the podcast and in our network, we have seen the adoption of new technologies in the AEC industry and even beyond, getting taken into entertainment and movies and forensics. And so our goal with this platform is to really have open conversations with people from different industries about how they've seen new technologies brought into the design world, into their processes, whether they have used them, they haven't used them, they see interest, some of the challenges. So we're excited to kind of just jump in and explore some of that with you.
Sure. Sounds good.
So maybe we could start with just some of your thoughts. Obviously, we don't know the level of which you've used these technologies. So maybe we can jump in with your initial thoughts
Sure.
within your past roles in design. Maybe when was the first time you had heard about or seen, some of laser scanning or point clouds coming into your practice?
Yeah, so I think personally, from my experience, it really started in probably late 2012. Obviously, prior to that, I had heard about 3D scanning, incorporating that into a BIM. A lot of in-field validation and verification of the BIM during construction, et cetera. But in regards to my career, it really started, I'd say, late 2012 on several projects at Disney. And that's where, I was tasked to onboard some vendors, some scanning vendors for several projects that I worked on and managed. And this was, again, it was 2012. And, of course, this is, 7-8 years ago at this point. So, back then it was like, oh, wow, it's black and white and you can kind of see what's going on in the model and the output. And nowadays it's almost photorealistic. It seems, it's amazing how much it's advanced in just 7-8 years. Yeah.
And I think something that came to my mind just now thinking about that is, every time someone finds a new technology, they always also still have a way to complain about it, right? So like back then when scanning was just starting to, become more and more used, even the grainy black and white point cloud was still amazing.
It was. Yeah.
And people are still like, man, it's hard to see what we're looking at. And even with as beautiful as it is today, there's still challenges. And it's like, man, but we just want to be able to hit a button and say, here's our model. And the one thing it makes me think about is Wi-Fi on airplanes. That's one of those where it's like you're flying through the sky in thousands of pounds of metal, and you're complaining that the Wi-Fi is slow. Like you still have Wi-Fi, and that's one of those things that I think about when we're talking about new technology. Anyways, so back 7 or 8 years ago, even in the last few years, things have changed so drastically. From the quality of data coming out of it, from the different options out there as far as hardware options, handheld, backpacks, mobile, some of them are faster, some of them are cleaner. People are really putting quite a push to it. Was when you were getting into those projects, was that the first time that scanning had really been brought in to use for those types of efforts down there?
I believe it was. It had been done in some smaller scale, but some of the projects I was working on and all the projects I worked on at Disney were in the berm, as we say. They were within theme parks.
Yeah.
So working within the berm brings on a whole new set of challenges.
Yeah.
But for me, I know they had done it at a small scale, but not at the scale that we were doing it on some of the projects in the Magic Kingdom and Disney's Hollywood Studios.
Yeah.
We were scanning major portions, say 1/6 or one large portion of a theme park.
Yeah.
For the scale of projects that we were doing. And the other interesting factor is we had to do it all third shift. So it was all done at night. So when we got the scans back, again, this is kind of like the black and white scan days. We got the scans back. It looked like a black and white picture taken at night on a kind of Instamatic camera. Even still, though, it was amazing technology. but that's just one of the hurdles that you have working in operating theme parks. So,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. What were some of the reasons that you guys were exploring doing the scanning?
Yeah, so it was due to the level of involvement of the projects. Um, Obviously, there's a large archive of existing documents and drawings and et cetera. However, as you can imagine, for a project, any building that's 40 plus years old, there might be 15 iterations of one sheet of drawings, and it's like, okay, well, which one is correct?
Yeah.
Um,
If any of
and
them.
yeah, exactly. Out of a set of 1,000 drawings,
Yeah.
you might have 4, 5, 10 different iterations of each sheet.
Yeah.
So really, we wanted a good base point to start the project from, and because of the level of involvement of the project, because of the existing assets that it was touching, in both cases, we needed that level of documentation. And in many of these projects that I'm speaking of, we not only scanned everything above surface, but we were very detailed in doing GPR scanning below surface to validate existing utility runs and sizes. And in most cases, the as-built drawings were pretty good. But in many cases, there were these wily, utilities that no one knew about. And
Yeah.
on both these projects I'm speaking of, I spent probably a year trying to find every piece of existing documentation I could find. I literally reached out to the old timers and said, "Hey, what's on your computer? Can you send it to me?" Because we did a whole comparison of existing as-built drawings, and then we layered that in with all the scanning that we did, and we did a comparison, and then of course we ended up using more of the scan probably than we thought we were going to do.
Yeah.
So that that's just some of the early ways that we use 3D scanning and GPR as well, just to validate what was truly there. Are those corners of the buildings really where they say they are? Obviously, we did traditional survey. We coupled that with the 3D scan, and then merged that with the GPR scan, and we had a fairly good holistic view of what was going on within the limits of work of our project.
Yeah, that's awesome. Out of curiosity, because we see the answer really different from different industries, would you do scans based on an individual project, or did you guys end up getting to the point that you tried to build out an as-built of an entire area, or if not the whole park, and try to keep like a living as-built document that you knew you could get in and use on whatever you needed when you needed it?
Yeah, it really depended on the project itself, and quite honestly, the budget of the project.
Yeah.
I mean, to be somewhat transparent, we were scanning in some instances acres of space of existing assets. And then in one instance, there was a project where it was a build out of an existing facility. And we essentially gutted the inside of this existing building. And we did a scan of the interior as best as we could. And that brought on a whole set of other challenges, which we can get into. But we knew in certain instances that the limits of our work were tight. We had to, really rein in how much we impacted, because as you probably know, once you start impacting and digging up existing utilities that are 40 years old, if you touch it, you own it. And if it's out of the limits of work, then, you had to go justify that to your leadership of, well, why did you damage that 24-inch chilled water line that you just hit? And why didn't you know it was there?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of that. It was in some ways a lot of risk mitigation. In some instances, it was just purely the existing as-builts of that portion of the park was almost day one drawings. It really hadn't been touched that much at the scale that we were working at. So we needed that validation of scanning.
Yeah. And that's I think one of the beauties of laser scanning is that every industry we talk with or work with, whether it's a chemical plant, an oil facility, a nuclear, architecture, theme parks, like a lot of people think, oh man, those big companies, I'm sure that like they've already got this under control. They've kept things organized and accurate as you go. And it's like, no, I think this is kind of an area that's been dropped, honestly. And then you don't really think about it until then you get into a project where you're like, Okay, well, we do need to know what's there. Where's the old drawings? I don't
Right.
know. They're not accurate. Someone didn't
Yeah.
update them. It's a process that even in the design side, we've heard from people that don't even understand how inaccurate some as-built drawings
Right.
are, because during construction something got shifted. Somebody didn't remeasure to make sure that it
Right.
actually got put where it was. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of as-built drawings are really just close, but
Right.
if you're looking at nowadays, people are prefabricating steel for
Mm-hmm.
buildings and for rides and things like that, that
Mm-hmm.
they have to be so much more accurate than what most
Right.
as-builts give you. The implementation of new technology is really changing the game in a lot of ways, from the accuracy of the drawing you start with to even if it is risk mitigation.
Right.
There's so many benefits you get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
What about, within the scanning and the point cloud side of things, what are some challenges that you see in the implementation of that within a project?
Yeah, I think one of the things that our teams and even myself struggled with was, and again, kind of going back to when we first started doing it, was how much information do we need to pull out? Do we just need to pull out the existing corners and the existing top of parapets or whatever it might be, or the limits of work? Or do we need very detailed top of curb, top of paving, top of parapet, top of stairs? So it was, how much information do we really need to pull out of the cloud? And I think some of the things we didn't really understand early on, back when we first started doing it. And this was at the same time that really, a lot of the theme parks were transitioning from 2D AutoCAD into BIM, using BIM and using Revit. And how do we deal with all that? So it was really, how much do we want to pull out? How much do we want to pay for as the owners? At the time I had to justify why we were spending that much money on 3D scanning acres of existing assets. And then once you receive that information, it's a lot of data that at the time, the hardware, like you were saying earlier, our computers could hardly even open the files. So that was like, okay, well, we need to upgrade our hardware, at least on a few workstations, to even manage this data that we've received. And in some instances, we had to really go back to our vendor and say, hey, can you generate this information on top of what we already received, because we didn't know what we didn't know at the time.
Yeah. And I think that those are still very relevant challenges, because, even though it was several years ago for some of the projects and some of the things you're talking about, we still see firms that right now are learning about scanning for the very first time.
Oh, wow.
And so they're starting all these challenges from the beginning. Like, what can we do with the data? Oh my gosh, the data's huge. Like, our computers don't even have enough space to hold the file, and we're using laptops. And how do you transfer the data? And we see all of those challenges still being relevant. So it's nice to hear. Did you ever utilize drones or aerial to capture whether LiDAR or photogrammetry in that process?
Early on, when we started on some of my projects, really getting into scanning, I was pushing my leadership and my department VP. It's like, okay, here are the benefits. Here are the 15 benefits that I can see of the department buying a drone. And, at the time, when you're buying a drone and you're flying it over a hot spot that has the, air restrictions of some military bases, that approval process takes quite a while internally, to put that lightly. We ended up not getting one for our department. Another project at the time bought one, and I think they got to fly it all of about a day and a half before it was shut down. So that was something I was really pushing to get, for a whole host of reasons. As you can imagine, these facilities and these sculptures that we really create within theme parks, access issues to certain things, such as, I was just saying, hey, let's use it to get up on these odd shaped and odd located roofs to do a visual survey, a condition survey. Do we need to change that roof as part of this project, or can we keep it? Yes, we had the documentation from the preventative maintenance group. However, it's great to get eyes on it and not have to get a lift and not have to go. So a drone could really, get involved with that. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do it. I was pushing hard for it to get a commercial grade drone, but I know now, as part of Disney, when they're doing Shanghai Disneyland, they utilize drones a fair amount. I'm not specific on how much they use, but it's a touchy issue because you want to use that technology. You want to harvest that data and that information as designers and as architects and engineers and as an owner. But it gets into you're flying over some sensitive.
Yeah. Did you, and I know some even more recently than in the past, there's different softwares and just regular panoramic cameras available. Have you ever looked at utilizing just panoramic imagery for, virtual tours or for letting teams visualize a space without walking to it?
We did, yeah. We did utilize that, kind of later and even more recently on some projects I've been consulting on. Using the 3D cameras that you can edit and show the view that you want to show, and it gives that virtual walkthrough. And as you can imagine, a lot of these teams, like many large projects, you're working with teams that are on two different coasts, multiple time zones. In some cases, we had internal team members that were in Shanghai, and we were in Florida, and the base of the team was back in California. So being able to use that, that 3D technology of walkthrough to look at visual intrusions or whatever it might be, was a great tool. And that's, that's off the shelf consumer technology that doesn't cost a lot of money at this point.
Yeah. That's a very nice, easy entryway to get the visual aspect into multiple hands. Did you, and I know a lot, again, has changed even in the last few or several years as far as the scanner quality and the colorization and density. Have you used scanners more recently that have kind of the higher quality or colorized images with it?
We have, yes. And it's, even I'm blown away at it's almost it looks like a pixelated picture at this point that I'm going to go out and shoot just for fun. It's amazing how much further it's come and how, the detail and, just the product that you get on the back end is I think, a lot cleaner. It seems it's, it works better with the architects or the engineers, hardware and programs. It's just amazing how much it's been advanced in the last few years.
Yeah, it really is. Did you guys ever get into implementing virtual reality, like through whether it's design or visual of spaces, or did that ever get integrated?
We did. Disney has both on both coasts here in the U.S. within their offices. They have the rooms that you can virtually walk through models. And really, a lot of that technology is based on incorporating the BIM or 3D Max models or SketchUp models, etc. And it really gives the folks that don't do this every day, that don't visualize in 3D every day, the ability to walk through the project and in some instances get a lot of creative or executive approval of and even in other instances the end user, the operator. We use that tool a lot to look at access issues to certain pieces of equipment that might be in an odd location. We could show them in 3D in virtual reality, and we use a lot of not so much the goggles, but the glasses with the I don't even know the specific terminology, but where it's projected in a room. And they can essentially stand still and walk through the room. So we harvested that information and that technology quite a bit for multiple reasons.
Awesome. Are there any other technologies kind of within this realm that that maybe we haven't touched on that you find interest in or have utilized?
I know virtuality is something that's talked about a lot in the theme park industry. In my experience, and in speaking with a lot of folks that are a lot smarter than me about that technology, I think that technology at scale to be put in a theme park, I don't think it's quite there yet. I think AR is a better technology that's probably a little bit more advanced. I know there's a lot of work that's being done on that on VR. I think to harvest and to create a VR experience that runs 18 hours a day, almost 365 days a year, at scale,
Yeah.
pushing 2,000 plus guests through it every day. That I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah.
It'll get there.
Yeah.
But augmented reality, I think we'll see augmented reality come into play even sooner
Yeah.
than virtual reality. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What about maybe we could even touch on not even just technology specifically, but some maybe some thoughts on you from your time kind of managing teams. Are there some other tools or processes that you've seen kind of help with pulling this together? Design using different teams across countries. Yeah, just some more thought from you there.
Yeah, I'd say first off, communication. Good communication is always key.
Yeah.
Never fail. Well, the first thing I heard when I went to Disney was never fail to confirm the obvious. And then I always added on top of that, we'll confirm what their obvious is versus what your obvious is. So I think good communication, having a system or a network of identifying issues as you go along, whether it's, some sort of online technology or a process that identifies the issues as you go, that documents those issues. I used to say that selective amnesia came in pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember doing that a month ago. Well, we have this documentation that shows that we did that. So, being able to use technology and software and programs that are helpful to teams is important. I think one of the things we ran into in some projects was that we incorporated too many pieces of software, too many pieces of organizational software, and those software became the project instead of the project being the project.
Yeah.
And, we learned from our mistakes, and it's like, okay, let's rein it back in. Let's just use these 2 or 3, pieces of software, working with designers and the trade partners, the construction team as well. I can think of one project where we went off the rails, and we had like 5 different pieces of software, almost doing the same thing in terms of collaboration and change management documentation. And we all just had to take a step back and be like, okay, this is too much.
And I think that's kind of a similar problem with honestly implementing anything, implementing the new technology. You can get too many things going at once,
right,
where you start spreading too thin, or if you think about that process specifically with the technology, someone learns about laser scanning, but they don't know the different options available. They don't know who to utilize. They don't know what that person knows. You just start in on a process. It can become more of a mess, because then you find out, the data is too big. We can't use the point cloud directly. How long is it going to take to create a model out of? Do you feel like when you got in using some of the newer technologies and the scanning that there was enough training or educational material, or did you find that to be like you kind of had to hands-on just go through the difficulties yourselves?
I think early on, I would say, 2012, 2013-ish, it was a, tread lightly with all parties involved. More recently, in the past few years, a lot of the higher end vendors and implementation teams and contractors, they're most of them are using this type of technology in some form or fashion.
Yep.
Whether it's just validation during construction, or whether it's integration of a design BIM, taking that, interpolating that into a construction BIM. So I'd say most of the folks now that I've had the fortune of working with have been using this technology for at least a few years.
Yeah.
Early on it was, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yep.
But, the good thing was that we worked with a lot of good design vendors and construction folks that were eager to utilize this, because I think they saw this is the future. This is where it's headed.
Yeah.
And we can use this for multiple reasons, not just to figure out what's out in the field right now. We can use this later in construction for validation. Are we meeting our targets, each week in terms of milestones, in terms of construction, et cetera? There's a lot of information that can be pulled and utilized from scanning.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate all that, kind of talking about some of your history and background. Maybe we can shift a little bit to what you have going on now. What's your new focus?
Yeah, so my new focus now is really not so much the day in, day out drawing the details that so much. It's more about, giving back the subject matter expertise that I've had working at Disney, and then after Disney, working with all sorts of folks. It's really about, giving back my successes and my failures, to be perfectly honest. Sometimes not knowing what to do, or telling someone, hey, you probably don't really want to do that at this point in the project, or you should be doing this, and why aren't you doing this at this point in the project? It's a lot of that. It's also a lot of quality control in terms of design. And in some cases, it's a lot of mentoring. I get a lot of young folks reaching out to me that are either in architecture school, want to become architects, or engineers as well, or want to get into the theme park design. And they look and they're reaching out to me. They're saying, "Hey, I saw the documentary. I've seen all the books, and what's it really like?" And I'm like, "Okay, here's what it's really like."
Get the behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah. So it's a lot of that. It's really, I've been trying to just give back what I've learned. I don't know everything, but I know quite a bit about a few things. So it's about giving that back and helping teams hopefully not have to deal with some of the challenges that I had to. And if they do, here's how you can probably get out of that challenge.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you still find yourself running into either utilizing or talking about some of the technologies or implementing those within your clients?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of them, it's always the same conversation. It's how much do we need to use and when? And my opinion is, based on some of my efforts at Disney, and even after Disney, it's, in some instances, you want to use the right technology at the right time. And in some instances, the boat is left. It's too late. You're going to spend, 5-6 weeks out in the field scanning something, another whatever X weeks of having all the data pulled out of the cloud. And then, 3 months from now, you're going to get that point cloud that you wanted. And at that point, it's too late. You're too far down the road in terms of design. So what can we do to get around that?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, one of our recent episodes, we really delved in and talked about the different tools available, because even within something like laser scanning, there are so many options at this point that even in a scenario where it's like, man, we're behind schedule. Well, is there still a way that you could capture some, information? Could you use a mobile unit or a handheld unit that maybe it's not the quality you wanted, but you still get some information out of? Or, or trying to educate people on the fact that some of those are lower accuracy, and is it going to meet the need that you need? Or do you have to integrate survey control and terrestrial data? So it's nice to try to educate people on the different options, which is one of our goals. We're hoping to continue to push that, so that even in your scenario where you're looking at different options, different clients with different challenges, what are all the options available when it comes to the technologies? Things are changing on an annual basis. People have found the use for these technologies, and now you've got new software coming out that can do different things with the data that couldn't be done last year. And so it's really cool to continue to see that push forward. Now I got to ask a futuristic question.
Sure.
If you could kind of think about the design world and these newer technologies, if you could look into the future, maybe 20 years, that's something that would help your job, help the design world, what would it be? Would it something to do with either robots or AI, or the improvisation of one of these technologies that already exist? What's something you could see in the future?
I think being able to iterate a design, maybe not to full completion, because that's sometimes detrimental, but being able to provide multiple iterations of a design very quickly. And having that iteration of the design being pretty healthy and advanced enough that the folks that don't do this every day, the operators or the owners, et cetera, they can see where you're headed sooner within the design process.
Which is probably getting into the AI generative design process where, it's helping kind of come up with iterations for you.
Right, exactly. And being able to, resolve the design issues, the 100,000 plus design issues you have with these large scale projects, quicker and faster. And then on the back end of that, being able to give that information to a project estimator or the contractor, and being able for them to harvest an estimate quicker than maybe we were doing today, and being able to say, okay, here's your chicken, beef, and sausage. Your chicken costs X, your beef is going to cost this, and your sausage is going to cost this, Mr. Owner. Which option would you like us to go down? In some instances that can take a month and a half now.
Yeah.
And on the scale of a project, if we could do that whole process, from start to finish, that whole evaluation, within 2 days, that would be amazing. The lag and the latency that would be hopefully eliminated on a project, and the cost of design and evaluation and value engineering that often takes place. If we could do that in a lot faster, man, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good area for improvement because especially in the big projects, you spend so much time and money before you even ever find out if you're going to end up doing the project. Just getting to that point. That's awesome. Are there any other topics? I think for the most part, we've touched on a lot of the technologies I wanted to just explore. Anything else you'd like to chat over?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question to you is, where do you think it's headed? Where do you think in the next 5 years it's all headed? Where do you see coming down the pike that maybe the rest of us haven't quite seen yet?
Yeah,
technology.
I've been asked a few times recently, like, is there something new that I'm excited about? And my honest current answer is that I'm just excited to see more adoption of even what's already in existence, because, places like, especially, your background, getting in a firm like Disney or, some of the other big firms have adopted this pretty well. But we have seen so many of the mid-sized firms and small businesses that honestly don't use it at all yet. So our biggest interest, today is just continuing to educate and help people get on the right track with even what exists now. Because we see so many people still running into issues using the wrong technology, or running into projects that they're still out there measuring multiple story buildings by hand, and they have big budgets for it, and we're like, man, you could do that, like half the budget of what you're doing by hand, you could do it by scanning it, or so I'm still really excited about just continuing to educate and push the existing technology. I do think there's a lot of areas that are going to get more advanced, though. I think photogrammetry is going to be one. There's a lot of push for taking panoramic images and mapping that out into a data set. Improving the speed. Laser scanning is. I still love terrestrial laser scanning. Like that is my favorite thing, because the point clouds, you can see absolutely everything. It's colorized. But there's a lot of focus on trying to make that faster. There's the mobile units that are out there that for most of our application, I don't think they're quite dense enough yet or accurate enough yet. We come from a land surveying background, and we understand that, when you have a project that really needs accuracy, you got to be able to control that down and verify that from one end of the project to the other, you don't have feet of difference. So I think there's a lot of improvement to be made even in the existing technologies, just from the speed. The data size is the one thing that we hear from every single person we talk to is, how in the world are people dealing with terabytes of laser scan data? How do you split that up? How do you get it to different offices? How do you share it? So I think the thing that I'm most interested in and see happening is just improvement on the existing technology. The next thing after that, I think, is integrating, you see robotics that are carrying around scanners through a job site. The idea that on a construction job, after everybody goes home, a robot could come out and scan the floor and give you an updated data set the next morning. I think a lot of things like that are honestly not too far away. there's still challenges that exist with it, similar to self-driving cars. You know,
Right.
can they drive themselves? Yes, but what happens if you trust it and something fails?
Right.
You know, it's kind of the same with robots
Yeah.
and scanners. It's like, honestly, the technology's almost there. I have a vacuum that goes through my
Right.
house and it vacuums the whole house. It maps itself. It knows my floor plan. It knows
Right.
if I say don't go in this room or this room, and then it goes back and charges itself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the technology I think is there, but within construction and within the environments, there's still so
Right.
many challenges to address. And safety is, of course, one of
Sure.
the biggest focuses for every industry. So
Mm-hmm.
if the technology is less safe, even though it improves speed, it's still not going to get adopted.
Right.
So I think as people find ways to improve the safety aspect, I think the robotics are going to become definitely something that's more utilized.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So as much as I love the future,
Yeah.
I am still excited about some of the basics of just
Right.
laser scanning and getting that to be on every single construction project everywhere in one way or another.
Right.
So that's still our focus, is that, and then making sure people know how to utilize the data, when to
Right.
utilize certain processes, how can you use the point cloud, when do you need to build out a full model, because there are challenges in every single step.
Oh, yeah.
So that's that's where we're at.
Awesome. I love it.
Well, I really appreciate you jumping on with us today. Again,
Sure.
I will. I look forward to sending your links out, and we'll make sure people get to take a look at your book.
Cool.
I think the background you have and continuing to help educate teams is awesome. So we will also be sure, as we're working with different companies that are looking for help and struggling, that we'll pull you in.
Awesome. I'd appreciate that. Definitely. And, I'm always a fan of scanning. And, I've had a lot of people reach out to me on some of the newer projects, and they were skeptical. And I was like, no way. Here are 15 reasons why we should be doing this at some level, like you said. Find the right level for the project.
Yeah.
And at the right time. And because the data that can come out of this is not only beneficial on the design side, but also the implementation side. So it spans through the whole project. You're not just buying something that's only used once and then just doing it.
And that's one of the things that I really like, even again about scanning specifically, is just that not only does it replace something that already has to be done.
Right.
You need the as-built before you start a project. Right. You have to have that anyways. But not only do you get an accurate as-built, you get imagery, you get material you can use for marketing, you get material you can use for a safety plan, you get, coming from traditional survey, you're like, well, you used to topo things with taking individual little points. With scanning, there is no, I forgot to shoot the corner of the sidewalk. Like when you scan, you get so much incidental data, even if it wasn't the focus.
Exactly.
So scanning still excites me because I think there's so much data people get out of it. And, one of the hardest things is people are hesitant to change.
Yeah, exactly.
They're hesitant to trying something new. Something we've heard over the years is like people that don't yet use scanning, they don't use it because they think it's going to be really expensive or really hard to use. But when you break down and look at ROIs and you look at the difference between how do we do it now, and how would we do it if we scanned it? Well, you'll be in the field for 3 weeks by hand or for 4 days by scanning. So even if it's even if it costs a little bit more per day, you're getting that faster. And then even like you talked about on some of your past experiences, the purpose in the scan was maybe even risk mitigation. What's the risk cost if we don't do it and something, whatever it is, whether we hit something or something's designed wrong or something's fabricated and it doesn't fit and now we have to send it back. And now there's so many, even in the risk factor side. I think, scanning is a no-brainer for so many projects. I think continuing to just educate. That's why we're excited about doing this. It's,
awesome.
Spreading the education, trying to help people understand different industries, how it can be used, why it should be used, and when not to use it. There are times that you don't want to use certain technologies. So we're just excited to continue to help people however we can.
Awesome. I appreciate it. This is great. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Reality Capture Network, bringing the future to you.